I'm so pleased to see Paul. You know, by the time this goes out, Paul will have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I mean, the second I heard it was taking place in Philly, I thought this is surely from both a storyline perspective and where it is, this has got to be his year. I mean, it's about, say what you will about the Hall of Fame and how subjective it is and how people are chosen, but I mean,
Yeah.
Paul Heyman's about 20 years overdue. So probably one of my WrestleMania highlights is the fact that I'm going to get Paul Heyman with a live mic, hopefully being allowed to share his story for a bit on that stage. Yeah, so much is said about Paul in terms of, obviously the kind of crazy genius. Obviously, in the latter days of ECW, there's so much talk about kind of bounce checks and the financials, but you know, I would argue that no one's possibly done more for this business and where this business is today than Paul Heyman. I mean, what say you on the man as someone who works so closely with him?
Dude, like when they announced him, I was kind of shocked, not just because, excuse me, when they announced he was going in, I was shocked he was going in, not because I didn't think he belonged, but I could see Paul turning it down. You know, why are you putting me in? I am not done yet. I could see him, just going, hey, I'm just getting warmed up. I'm just getting started here. But if you look at the evolution of Paul Heyman, he's been in the business since he was 15. You know, he's, stuck in as a photographer. He was, started doing color commentary for Indies in Jersey. He was dared to be a manager by Bam Bam Bigelow. So he went to Memphis and became a manager and bounced around, became a booker with Eddie Gilbert in Continental. And then, it's crazy. He's only 8 years older than me, but I've been
Really?
watching him. He's 58. I'm going to be 51 in May. So he's 8 years older than me, but he did so much before I got in the business, but he was only a couple years old.
Well, it's because he was basically a child who blagged his way into the business, didn't he? I mean, the stories of him in his very early days are legendary. How he managed to kind of get behind the scenes in Madison Square Garden as a press photographer and stuff. I mean, he just blagged his way in, didn't he? It's incredible.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Cameron Crowe, the the everybody knows him as a movie director now, but as a kid he BS'd his way into, writing for Rolling Stone magazine. And then he goes on to, tour with, all these legendary rock bands. And then he becomes his author, and then he starts writing movies and producing, and he's revered as this great Paul Heyman's in a lot of ways. Paul Heyman's a lot like, Cameron Crowe, where he just, he BS his way into the business and, endeared himself to some good, mindset, three wise men, Blassie, Albano, and Grand Wizard. They took a liking to him, and he learned from the best, and he carried that forward. So yeah, I mean, there's people who are in a Hall of Fame that deserve to be in a Hall of Fame, but they're known for wrestling. Paul's been in there, going to a Hall of Fame, and he's done so much from entry level all the way up to being a part of, some of the greatest wrestling moments there are, and you can see his fingerprints on, a lot of stuff they're doing now with the bloodline storyline and
Mm.
the subtleties of everything. Like I keep saying, Rock goes through the point, but he throws out the thumb
Hmm.
out for the
Yeah,
L, and then you see Paul Heyman like looking at him, like, catching him, throwing up the L and adding that intrigue. I can see that. To me, I see Paul's fingerprints all over that storyline and the
yeah.
build. I mean, when you look at ECW and they built up Sabu and Taz for a year, it just, I can see his fingerprints all over. And like I said, he's nowhere close to being done. You
No.
know, he's he's more than given enough to this wrestling business. And when you go back to ECW and the way, he's a great creative person. Maybe he was a bad businessman, but just like any kind of startup business,
Hmm.
if you go and open up a store, you're going to be in the hole for a good while until you garner a you know customers or fans, and start building it up. And there's a point, maybe 97 where ECW actually started making money, but they were still paying for the previous years. They're
Mm,
still paying for 96 and 95, if they could, and if they could just got that, they got the TV deal that was supposed to be the lifeline, and then turned out to be the thing that sunk the company. But um, Paul Heyman owes me nothing. You know, you know, he never bounced a check on me, but what he was paying me probably wasn't compared to anything he was paying anybody else, because I was only a year and a half in the business. But how do you put a price tag on the things I learned from him?
yeah,
So essentially, ECW was my college.
yeah,
People go to college spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn something, and all they get is a diploma to hang on the wall that may be worth something. I could put this on the wall, but I have to go out there in the world and learn. So I got to learn on the job. I went to Al's school, learned there, went to ECW, and went to a whole nother level of learning from Paul Heyman, Terry Funk, Tommy Rich, Tracy Smothers, all the veterans who were there before me. So Paul Heyman gave me way more than anything you could put a dollar amount on. I'm sitting here in this house talking to you on this podcast, all because of Paul allowed me to express myself and guided me, and you know he wasn't above being approached and having something suggested to him, because of, hey, if your idea works just as well as mine, let's go with your idea. It took pressure off of him. So great talent, great mind, great producer of talent. And like you said, this Hall of Fame inductions, went well 20 years overdue. But again, he's far from finished.